All right, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High Elohim of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I want to say peace to each and every one of you in the name of His Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, who we know as Jesus the Christ. So as a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to bring a message contained in His Word, I never counted it as a light thing to do so. In today's message, I want to deal with something that is being talked about a great deal um, amongst those who deal with biblical topics, and that is the third temple. And what is causing a lot of talk about the third temple today is not just because of um, the geopolitical situation in the land today with the Palestinians and the Israelis' dealings with Hamas, um, the war that's going on, etc. But also because of these red heifers that have been um, acquired, and there has been a supposedly a practice run where a red heifer was sacrificed as a burnt offering to make the basically you have to have these waters of purification, and you have to have the ashes of a red heifer, and this is necessary in order to for purification purposes to reestablish um, animal sacrifice through their so-called Kohani, because they are not actually the people. But nevertheless, um, this is now whether let me say this, whether or not that was a practice run. I mean, I saw actually what I believe to be real uh, footage of it, the burnt offering, the sacrificing of this red heifer. Um, and they said, well, this one was disqualified, so this was a dry run. And just another side note, um, the red heifer has to have no, it can't have more than two hairs that are not red, and they're, from my understanding, examined. I'm not there, but they're supposedly there in Shiloh in a secret location, and they are examined every day. Um, Now, I don't necessarily believe that it was a dry run. I don't know, or practice run. I have no idea. Um, but either way, you can see things being uh, moving fast prophetically. When I say prophetically, because we know there has to be a third temple. Okay, so if you look at institutions like the Temple Institute, and you know uh, they have every they have refabricated every instrument of sacrifice. They have their so-called priests in training. Um, they have everything they would need except for political expedience. That's all they need. They need just simply the opportunity to rebuild this third temple. Now, this is obviously a very delicate situation because um, the Dome of the Rock and El Mosque are in the traditional site. Um, if you believe that to be where the temple was located, they many of them believe, I believe it to be a fort, but nevertheless, they believe that that was where it was located, and that's what the Dome of the Rock and El Mosque are right now, and that means that if that was removed or something happened to that particular location, it wouldn't just impact the Muslims in that particular area, but that would be a worldwide affront and might lead to um, conflict for sure, because Jerusalem in particular is the third most holy site in Islam behind Mecca and Medina. So this is the situation, but I think we need to pay attention to it because of what the Lord said and what is written prophetically by others like Paul. So let's pick it up. We're going to pick it up in Matthew, the 24th chapter. In Matthew, the 24th chapter, in verse 1, it says, "And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So now they show him the temple, and he's prophesying of the destruction of the temple. Now, the destruction of the temple happened uh, in 70 AD. Okay, so this is what he's telling them is going to happen to the temple. This is uh, less than 40 years, right around that time before it actually occurred. And so, and you see in other places where he prophesied of the destruction of uh, the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem, and that was brought on by Titus and the Romans in the war that occurred between 66 and the final ransacking of Jerusalem, and the destruction of the temple. The destruction of Jerusalem took place in 70 AD. But now, um, I'm gonna just read this here. Hold your finger here, because like I said, he prophesied of this. He said in Luke 20 and 43, for the day shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee and compass thee round and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another. So now that's how you know that Wailing Wall is not the temple. He says, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. So now the time of thy visitation is referring to him. And because they rejected him, that actually sealed their destruction. And this was a pivotal point in the history of the Israelites, because that was the end of Israel, the true Israelites being who are black people that have been scattered into slavery all over the world. That was the end of them having any semblance of a nation. And those that were not captured at that time or killed at that time went into the diaspora, went into captivity, went into the interior of Africa, and ultimately was sold. Many of them were sold as Moshe prophesied, as bondmen and bondwomen. And when it says no man shall buy you, it means nobody redeemed them out of that situation. They are still in captivity, when I say in captivity, they are still in the diaspora until this day. And they will be in the diaspora until the Lord gathers his very elect, as also said in Matthew 24. But back to Matthew 24 and verse 3, I want to read that again. Or read it, because I didn't read this yet, because the disciples, when he tells them that the temple is going to be destroyed, obviously they are, can you imagine? I mean, that's the center of worship. And even though they're under the stranglehold of Rome, they still have a semblance of being a people, being a nation. And that's the center of worship, the temple. So he tells them, and it says in verse 3, because they're going to ask him a question about that. He tells them it's going to be destroyed. And they said, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? So now they want to know when this is going to be, but they also tie it into his second coming. And prior to his second coming, you have the rebuilding of the temple. Okay. And so he just told them it's going to be destroyed. Then he told them about other things that were going to take place, right? Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And then he talked about how there shall be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in diverse places. He talked about deception, because he said, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And that has happened wholesale. He talked about apostasy. He talked about false prophets. He talked about how the gospel will be preached. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. But then he says in some verse 15, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. And he goes on to tell them to flee. Why? He says, verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no ever shall be. And this is how you know this is future. He says, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Okay, so now that lets you know that this is future. So now we understand the temple was destroyed and defiled ultimately in 70 AD. But he's speaking not just about that, he's speaking beyond that. He's speaking of the temple being rebuilt, and he's or something. The way in which he's speaking, a temple has to be rebuilt in order for it to take place. And furthermore, he refers you back unto what took place, what you read about in the book of Daniel, and let's go there. And so in Daniel, we're in Daniel chapter, let's pick it up in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 13. I'll pick it up there. He says, let's pick it up at verse, 12. It says, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So what took place? Let's pick it up here. What took place in the book of Daniel? Let's pick it up here actually in Daniel 11 and 31. It says, an arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So now what is that referring to? So he says you need to look at that. So now this is referring to Antiochus, and there's a number of ways to pronounce that name, Antiochus Epiphanes. And so I want to read something that is Zondervan. This is the Zondervan Pictorial Bible Dictionary that speaks to what we just read in Daniel the 11th chapter and verse 31. This is on page 48, and it says Antiochus Epiphanes. Now this man was, these are my words now. This man was a truly wicked ruler, and he was considered a madman in some ways. And I want to read what he did. So it says, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of Antiochus III, and eighth ruler of the Seleucid dynasty. Okay, so you had these dynasties that were established after the empire of Alexander would fail, basically, because when I say it failed, it was split, because when he basically established his empire, then he died. Okay, and so that left his generals to fight it out. So you had Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. These four generals, basically, it was actually a lot of generals that were fighting. These four were able to come to power and split up this kingdom ultimately. So they established their own dynasties, but they were smaller than Alexander. So now you had Antiochus Epiphanes, and it says, in his attempt to Hellenize the Jews, he had a pig sacrificed on the altar in Jerusalem. So that's the abomination that make it desolate. He offered swine on the altar, just like I was talking about the altar. Because if you look at how it was set up, they would have this altar, and that altar they have burnt offerings. He sacrificed something that would totally defile it, because swine is unclean. You know that from Leviticus the 11th chapter. So it says, and it's again, in an attempt to Hellenize the Jews, he had a pig sacrificed on the altar in Jerusalem, forbade circumcision, and destroyed all the Old Testament books he could find. These outrages involved him in the Maccabean War, in which the Syrian armies were repeatedly defeated by the brilliant Judas Maccabeus. Okay, so that's what he's referring you to. You therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of that by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Now, some would say that's a person standing there, which is referring to the abomination of desolation, like an actual individual, Or if you look at the Greek and how it reads, it could be a literal image that an object that is placed in this temple that is rebuilt. Okay. And you know further that the temple has to be rebuilt, not just obviously because of what Christ said, but also let's see what Paul says in Second Thessalonians. This is Second Thessalonians, and we're going to pick it up in the second chapter. Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 1. Now in Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 1, the people were concerned with the return of Christ, just like his disciples were. What did they say? It says in one of the they said, "Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" So they wanted to know when he was going to return. Here in his second epistle to the congregation in Thessalonica, they wanted to know when he would return as well. And he says to them, something has to happen first. Let's find out what that is. So now this is Second Thessalonians 2 and verse 1. It says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand." Okay, so he says, don't be anxiety filled regarding the return of the Mashiach or Christ, because something has to happen first. So what has to happen first? Let's keep reading. It says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first." So you have apostasy that takes place. Then he says, "And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition," or destruction. So now this man of sin, it says the son of perdition. This is now Antiochus Epiphanes. This is referring to the man who people commonly call the Antichrist, not one just coming in the spirit of Antichrist, but actually the Antichrist. And so now that's the way he's commonly referred to. This is referring to him, and Antiochus Epiphanes, he foreshadowed this. Okay, and what he did, his defilement of the temple. Notice what it says here. So I'm gonna read verse 3 again. It says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." So now understand, that's not referring to Titus. Okay. It's not referring to the wrong Vespasian or anybody like that. This is beyond that. Verse 4, "Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Okay, so now Antiochus is just going back to him. See, because when you look at the text, you can see, you look at the prophets and what they wrote, you can see what's going to happen in the future. So like this guy, like Antiochus Epiphanes, he looked at himself like the manifestation of God. Again, Epiphanes, right? So like this is foreshadowed by him, and this same thing is going to happen again. Only this is different, because this man of sin is going to be empowered by Satan. Okay, and he's going to set up in the temple. Let's pick it up in Revelation, the 13th chapter. Revelation, the 13th chapter. And we get further insight into this man. This is Revelation, the 13th chapter. So, and we should understand who this man is. So who is this man? This man is going to be coming out of the office of the papacy. Okay. He is the one that's going to reestablish. When I don't say reestablish, the so-called Jews are going to reestablish the temple, and they're going to reestablish sacrifices. This one, and he's going to, this is because what you're starting to see, what you've seen in some years now, over this, well over quite a few decades now, you're seeing the reestablishment of what could equate to the reunification of the Roman Empire. You're seeing that with what is today under the banner of the European Union. And you're starting to see something that is further setting things in motion. The United States basically saying, hey, you have to pay your own way. And the Europeans saying, yes, we have to build ourselves up. See, this is after World War II. The United States took upon itself a lot of the weight in order to stop the spread of communism in particularly Western countries. They weren't so successful, at least initially, in the Eastern countries because of the Soviet bloc. So they what they did was they rebuilt, and they had NATO. They rebuilt through the Marshall Plan and had NATO. So these things though are starting to go by the wayside. And again, Europe is saying we must become stronger. And what's going to happen is the United States, it's the reason why you don't see them in biblical prophecy. The United States is going to take a back seat. And Europe is going to, Western Europe in particular, is going to be stronger and stronger. And their militaries are going to, as they did with the WEU, they're just going to come together. And these are going to be the poles. That's going to be one pole, one power, and out of which, that's the political military aspect of it. And also the spiritual aspect, though, is coming out of Roman Catholic Church. Because that's the aspect of the Roman Empire that didn't die. It died militarily and it died politically. It didn't die spiritually. And so I always like to equate it to the Pope carrying this dead carcass throughout the course of time. Almost dead, but it's going to be revived. Okay. And so then you have the powers out of the East. Okay. And these are the two that are going to be against each other. The United States is not in that. And so that lets you know that the United States takes a back seat. But nevertheless, this is Revelation, the 13th chapter, in verse 11. It says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Okay, so now this image, it's like kind of like what, and some would say that Antiochus, some would suggest that he set up a type of image in the temple. This one, though, you have to ask the question, where is this image going to be? That's something people need to ask themselves. So it's going to be such a great power on the earth, they're not going to be able to resist. And he's going to set up shop, and he's going to be empowered by Satan. He's doing miracles. He's having fire come down, or lightning come down from heaven. Okay. He's giving life unto this image. Okay. And so now, and he's going to require all to worship this image, similarly to how you go back in the book of Daniel and get further insight when you look at Nebuchadnezzar and how he set up an image. Wasn't in the temple, but he set up an image for worship and required everybody on his domain to fall down and worship it. And that's how Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Shadrach, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, those were their slave names. That's how they were cast into the fiery furnace because of their refusal to worship. And that's ultimately what's going to happen in these days. People are going to be faced with death. Now they were delivered. They acknowledge that the one they serve is able to deliver, but if not, they're not going to worship their gods, which thou hast set up. That's what he said. And so they showed you the precedent of what you need to be mindful of and need to do in these last days is not bow down to this image. Because if you do so, you read in Revelation, the 14th chapter, the very next chapter, that if you do so, you'll be cast into hell. Secondly, you need to understand, if you find yourself in that situation during great tribulation, you need to understand that you can't take the mark and that there is no rapture from great tribulation. See, the idea of a rapture and the expectation of a rapture is causing many to not worry about what they may have to face. There's no rapture. That is one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous doctrines regarding biblical doctrine, because it sets you up for total failure, because your faith will be devastated and destroyed when you realize that there is no rapture from great tribulation, what you've been waiting on. So instead of trying to prepare spiritually for what may occur, as far as persecution and as far as martyrdom, even, people are thinking that they just gonna float off to heaven, and that's not actually in the Bible at all. But it goes on to say, in verse 15, he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. So what does that look like? Whatever it is controlling buying and selling. Is it an e-tattoo? Some say an RFID chip. Some say biometrics. Whatever it is related to worship. And you know it's future because, and it said it technically could be some say like a mark, like on your right hand or your forehead, like they do on Ash Wednesday, just a mark. But understand, it's tied to buying and selling, and it's tied to this worship. You won't be able to buy or sell unless you take this mark. So if somebody had an RFID chip in them right now, which I would not suggest, that doesn't mean that that's the mark of the beast. Now, the technology overall, that will be utilized at this time, I believe it to be the technology that will be utilized at this time could very well be already in existence. Okay, that's not far-fetched to say, but it is associated with the worship. All right. So he says, and he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save, which means except he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. He goes on to say something that people need to take heed to. He says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600 threescore and six. That's 666. Now some have said, they speculated who that is. It's a number of a man, so they come or surmise that, hey, wait a minute, these are letters in a name. You've heard everybody from President Barack Obama to President Ronald Reagan. I believe Ronald Reagan, they looked at him because he had six letters in his name, and in addition, one of his addresses, I believe one of the presidents, one of their addresses they actually changed it because I believe it was 666. That could be Reagan. Don't quote me on that. I have to go back and look at that, but I want to say it was Reagan. So people said that. People have said it was Adolf Hitler. People have said it was Nero. But who this is, is none other than the Pope of Rome. And one of the titles that the Pope of Rome has historically, some say wasn't official, but they've definitely referred to themselves, and I can show you and have showed you throughout the years. If you go back to older lessons, we're talking about whether the lessons on Great Tribulation or whether the lessons I dealt with that refer to the Antichrist or that are about the Antichrist. Break this down, and I didn't come up with it. This is actually hundreds of years old. Vicarious Filidae. This title, or Vicar of Christ, replacement for the Son of God. This is the blasphemous title that the Pope has. And again, so say, well, it's not in an official capacity, but they have popes throughout the years, quite a few of them, and I've shown this in many lessons, how they have called themselves the Vicar of Christ, the replacement for the Son of God, and that is blasphemy. Only this time, when and again, this is about an office. I'm not claiming anybody in particular. He's the one. What I'm saying is the Pope, the office. He's coming out of that office. And when you add up the Roman numerals in Vicarious Filidae, you come up to 600, 3 square 6, or 666. Okay, and that's how you get that. And see, all that, again, I say that you need to question where this image is going to be. Furthermore, we need to understand that a third temple, before these things happen, he's going to sit in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. This one is going to rise. Okay, he's going to be empowered by Satan. You're going to have a temple. All not that long ago, to say that the temple was going to be rebuilt. Yeah, they had a hope of it, these Israelis, but this wasn't something that was even feasible. But you see what's happening now, and was it Pete Hegseth that said is he said, I don't know when, but it could be, it's possible. I'm paraphrasing, that this temple is being rebuilt. Now that's the Secretary of Defense. He wasn't Secretary of Defense when he said it, but he spoke to, this hope that many of them have, and some ridiculous reason. Well, it's ridiculous, but the evangelicals also want to support them, to the point where it's like, do you really understand what these people are saying? How are you in support of some people who don't believe in Christ, and you claim to believe in Christ? That doesn't make any sense, unless you are deceived as well. But this is just something we need to keep our eye on. I know a lot of things are coming, people are worried about their day-to-day existence in this economy, as bad as it is. Times are hard. People are, looking at things that are going on in the world, and things seem so volatile. They look at the political news, and it doesn't seem like, quite frankly, people have proper leadership, and everything is, so volatile, so troubling. But what people need to be paying attention to is what goes on in the navel of the earth, that in that land of Jerusalem, the ultimate city of the great King. People need to be paying attention to what's taking place there, because we are closer than ever to his return. And with that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer that you were edified.